Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky.
And I'm Joe Hovde.
On today's episode, we sit down with Michael Fisher, founder and CEO of Rotten. Rotten is a better-for-you candy company that's growing quickly by not marketing itself like a better-for-you brand. Michael started Rotten after realizing that healthier candy didn't have to be boring, and that there was a massive group of consumers who still wanted to indulge, just with fewer trade-offs. We talk retail velocity, how to use syndicated data, pricing and margin pressure from better-for-you ingredients, packaging trade-offs, and a lot more. We hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. If you don't mind giving a quick background on both yourself and on Rotten, that would be great.
Yeah, awesome. Excited to chat. My name is Michael Fisher. I'm the founder and CEO of Rotten, based in Los Angeles. And Rotten is a better-for-you candy company. So we make candy with way less sugar, packed with gut-friendly prebiotic fiber, and zero artificial dyes. So using kind of, all natural colors and flavors. We launched the company about 2 years ago and started direct to consumer, and then, have expanded into a bunch of retail partners since.
What ultimately compelled you to start the company when you did?
Yeah, I mean, truly just because it was a product I was looking for. I grew up obsessed with gummy candy, sour gummies. My older brother passed his obsession on down to me. And in college, I was like, I was bulk ordering candy to my dorm, and I was, known as the guy with the candy hookup if you wanted to come by. And at that same time, I started getting much more into health and fitness. I remember reading an article about like added sugar, what that was doing to our diets. I stopped drinking soda at that point and was cutting back on candy, but missed it a lot. And so I ended up trying some of the zero sugar products out there, some of the other low sugar stuff. And I think didn't love the product, which, was reason enough to start something. But I also just felt like there was this big brand opportunity where everything healthier immediately felt lame. And all of the candy I grew up with was like character driven and super fun and wacky. And I didn't know why you had to lose any of that when you made the product better for you.
It's an interesting trade-off, I guess, between, on one end of the spectrum, you can think about Sour Patch Kids, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you can think about Smart Sweets. You are using processed sugar, but it's better for you than other gummies that are using processed sugar. And clearly that's a strategic differentiator. I'm curious if that was your idea from the start, or if that idea sort of evolved over time. Did you explore the idea of working with non-refined sugars like coconut sugar, for example?
Yeah, it was definitely the idea from the start. I think I very clearly set out to reach a different customer. I think Smart Sweets is doing an awesome job serving their customer, but in starting Rotten, the thinking was, is there someone else out there that maybe isn't being served by that? And so very intentionally developing the product in a different way to speak to that other person.
Could you talk about just the first year or so of the brand? I know it sounded like it took a little while of kind of R&D in developing the product. I'm just curious kind of what went into that, and then when you were able to get something into market.
Yeah, so we launched the company 2 years ago, but I was working on it for 2.5 to 3 years before that, which was a long period of R&D and trying to find the right, manufacturer to commercialize with. So the plan was not to take 3 years. It did end up taking 3 years. And so, a lot of R&D went into that period. One thing we did early on was we had a Kickstarter campaign. And so we got a lot of early customers and supporters that way. And that actually gave us an audience with which we used to do a bunch of our R&D testing. So multiple kind of periods of, sending out samples to that group, getting feedback, iterating on the product. I think even with that though, when we did launch at the end of 2023, the product wasn't where it needed to be. And it's far from the product we're selling today. I think as much R&D we did before launch and sending to, this group of strangers who'd supported our Kickstarter, sending to friends, family too, even with all of that, nothing really replicates having a live product on the market and, putting ads on Meta and people leaving comments and reviews of their experience and feeling very emboldened to say whatever the hell they want. So that was really helpful for us to just get that more raw feedback, I think, and improve the product. So we definitely went through, I'd say, another 6 to 12 months right after we launched, a pretty intensive R&D where we made big changes to our product.
What did it look like when you were sending out batches to the Kickstarter group? Were you just cooking in your own kitchen? Did you have like an industrial space you were renting? Like, what did the process of actually like getting the first batches in hand look like?
Yeah, we developed the product with like a food science R&D partner, and so they would make samples in their lab. So we'd send those out, and then the other thing is manufacturing the product. We ended up going through like maybe 4 trials before we went into a production. And so those are, we rent the full day at the manufacturing plant, and, you make a small amount of material, but it's like production size batches, and you're just, trying to work through how to scale up your formula to the plant. And so you end up with, oftentimes significant amount of product that, is maybe turned out well. And, in our case, we ended up sampling a lot of that product too to get feedback from people.
Is there anything you feel like you learned from Kickstarter that you'd advise someone who was going to try to start out that way through Kickstarter? Like, what are the things you learned that you would do or do differently through that experience?
I've thought about this a little bit recently because I've had a couple friends, think about starting stuff and consider Kickstarter. I think Kickstarter can be tough for food and beverage. It's just not, that's not like the main thing people on Kickstarter are looking for. I think it's great to do some sort of pre-order system like that. So I'll start with that. Like, I think it's a great way to get your like brand positioning and product concept out there and see if that resonates with people even before you have a product, and like really start to find some of your early supporters. Like, I think it's a great way to validate a CPG item, which oftentimes can take a long time and a lot of money to like really bring to market. But I think Kickstarter versus just like doing pre-orders on your own website and doing a bunch of social media content to drive to that, like, I think I would maybe lean more towards just doing it yourself today. Kickstarter comes with its own great audience, and so that can be a benefit. But the challenge is, as a food item, there's just often misalignment. Like, people are on there looking for like more gadget type stuff.
That makes sense. Now that you've reached significantly greater scale, what does the actual both like new flavor development process look like, and what does it look like to get validation in the market today?
Not that different, which is kind of interesting to think about. We have been working internally on like what does kind of managing our R&D and innovation pipeline look like now that I'm not the only person in the company, and we're a team of 6, and sales needs to know what's happening, and marketing needs to know what's happening, and ops is obviously super involved in helping us bring these ideas to life. So I think finding a balance of like building out a process that's maybe different than a lot of me working with our R&D partner, but also like trying to retain some sense of that and being able to be small and nimble and move really quickly. So it still is really a lot of initial development, is me and the R&D partner bringing in our team to that, and then as we get to later stages of development, bringing in some of our customers in like small groups.
What does that look like tactically in terms of getting feedback from customers? Like, is it focus groups mainly, or are you still reading comments and things like that? Like, how do you understand what your customers are thinking?
On products we're currently selling, like, social comments and reviews are huge. And we have built out, again, kind of a function of like, there was a time in the company where I was the only one doing customer service and the only one on our social media. And so I saw everything myself and then could just bring that into what we wanted to improve. Now that's not the case. And so we have built out process for the team that is doing customer service to compile everything we're hearing and how we can communicate that back to the rest of the team and myself to action on. With new products that we're launching, we'll often focus on working with our group of subscribers. These are people who subscribe to our candy are generally our biggest fans. And, I don't think most people subscribe to gummy candy. And so, these are big supporters of ours. So we work with them on, oftentimes we'll send out free product in their subscription, and then we will follow up with pretty in-depth surveys, just trying to get a sense of what they think about the product.
I've noticed it seems like you're scaling really rapidly in terms of the number of retailers that you're now sold in? I know you started as a D2C brand, but it seems like you're growing really rapidly in that sense. What does that process look like, and how are you thinking about scaling in that way?
Yeah. I think it's important to, and one thing we've done a lot is like understand your category really, really well. And so, both from a perspective, which we can get into later on the innovation side of like what's working, what brands are growing a lot, what product lines are growing a lot, know that data. But then I think on the other side is channel dynamics for your category, like how much of your category is purchased online. How is that growing? On the retail side, which channels are best for your category? Which retailers are stealing market share in your category? Some of this you can't really access until you start buying syndicated data, which we like literally just started doing recently. But a lot of it you can. A lot of it you can find from Google and articles and things like that. And so one huge thing was launching the company. I always knew we were going to be a retail brand. It was just about when do we do that? What does the channel mix look like to get there? People are purchasing candy in store. And while online, I think has a lot of potential and is growing very quickly. And I think there's a way we can use our e-commerce channel to launch new products and to sell merch and serve our biggest fans who want to be buying in bulk. Like the average customer for Rotten wants to buy a bag at a time and often does so impulsively, which is difficult online. So knew that we needed to move into retail. Again, it was just a matter of when. I love that we launched direct to consumer. Honestly, we did so primarily because my background before Rotten was working in e-commerce. And so it was where I was comfortable. I knew absolutely nothing about retail, but it ended up being incredibly helpful. Like I shared, like this immediate feedback loop. Like the day we launch, we start getting comments. You start learning which marketing messaging is resonating with people, what people hate hearing about. And you don't get that in retail. Or if you do, it's really, really delayed. And so direct to consumer has been amazing for that. And it was an amazing place to start because of that. By far the biggest piece of feedback we get from customers, which again matches the data we see in our category, is people want to buy us in store. And so we started working towards that. And last year did a few like small retail tests. We launched in a regional grocery chain. We launched in Foxtrot in Chicago. We launched at Zoomies and started seeing success there. And from there, just like started to expand, started going to trade shows, and it all kind of snowballed.
On that note, I was just looking at the store locator on the website and seeing what's close to where I live in New York, and I saw Old Navy was a distributor, I think, or a retailer where I could go buy them. And I'm just curious, like, how does a retailer like that get set up? Like, does it go through a distributor, or like what does it actually look like to go from nothing to selling in Old Navy?
Yeah, Old Navy does go through a distributor called Vistar. Most retailers kind of in that channel use Vistar. Like you can imagine, like FedEx, Best Buy. Like the fun thing about candy, unique thing about our category, and applies to snacks too, is just like it's sold everywhere. It's not just sold in places that people buy food, and so it opens up the doors to a lot of interesting placements. Like I shared, Zoomies was one of our first retailers. That intro was another like founder friend who was like, hey, we just started selling there, like want me to intro you to the buyer. And we're one of their top candies now and have been working with them for a year and a half maybe now. So I think it's very channel dependent. Like they each kind of have a different dynamic of how you approach them. But I'd say broadly, like most retail, it does go through a distributor.
Just going back to what you said earlier about like buying syndicated data, if you want to understand how you're doing, let's say at Old Navy, do you need to buy syndicated data to like see what your velocity is at Old Navy, or do you work with them? Like, how do you even get that kind of reporting information?
Yeah, this is like one of the tricky things about being an emerging brand is you're often meeting with people who want to know your data. They want to know how well you're selling before they take the risk and take you on, but you're too small for it to be worth spending tens of thousands of dollars to buy a data package, which is what it costs. It's very expensive. So yeah, you have to be scrappy. You have to develop relationships with the buyers at the retailers you're at and ask them for data and try and build a data story without syndicated data. You have to, if you've launched online, use your online data. How can you make that feel compelling and build a data-driven story for retail. One thing we did there was we started surveying our e-commerce customers, trying to find insights that we felt could be really relevant to a retail buyer. And so one of the key questions we asked was, have you ever purchased better for you, healthier, natural, you name it, any of those things, candy before? Trying to see like, was Rotten replacing some of our competitor better for you brands, or like were we bringing in an incremental customer? And we saw 70% of our customers had never bought another better for you brand before. Rotten was their first. And so that became a really powerful kind of early data point for us when talking to retail about like, hey, you might already carry this other better for you brand. We're incremental to those brands. We have a different customer.
Why do you think that is that a lot of the customers are new to better for you candy and Rotten brings them in? Like, what do you think it is about Rotten that speaks to like a customer who's not already in the category?
Yeah. It's honestly, I think it's the most exciting thing that we're doing. And it was like, it's very intentional. It's why I started the brand. Like, we're attracting a customer that isn't necessarily out there specifically looking for healthy candy. Rotten is not all about health. Like, you look at our packaging for a millisecond, if you've never seen us, you wouldn't even know we were a better for you or a healthier candy. And I don't think that's the case with our competitors. Like, they have decided to position their brands in such a way that they want you to immediately know that they're healthy. They're oftentimes going after a customer that like really wants that healthy candy. Whereas I think for Rotten, we're showing that there's a lot of people out there that eat candy and can get excited about candy, but also want to be eating healthier and are going to feel better about eating Rotten because it is the better for you option. But like, maybe that's not the primary driver for them, and that really opens up the pool.
Do you find a lot of instances where consumers are eating Rotten without even knowing that it's better for you candy?
I definitely hear that from people, yeah, which I think is great because one of the goals in developing our candy is like, I never want someone's reaction to be like, whoa, that tastes really good for a better for you candy. Because I don't think long term we can be successful if that's the reaction. Like, maybe a lot of people will try the product, but will they keep coming back to it over this other thing that just tastes a lot better? Probably not. So we need to make sure we're developing something, you eat it, it's delicious, and there's a surprise that it's better for you.
Just going back to what you said about someone looking at the brand for a moment on shelf might not know it's better for you. What have you learned about packaging since you've started the company?
It's very fun, actually. Like, we haven't rebranded in any sense. Like, the brand, the ethos, the look is still the same, but we have tweaked our packaging so much since the very beginning. And it's all been for the purposes of shelf visibility and performing on shelf at retail. One of the earliest things that was happening was I would consistently have friends, like people that know me personally, know the brand, not be able to tell the difference between our two flavors at the time on shelf. Like, I would tell them to go buy one, they would buy the other, they'd send me photos, have no idea that they'd bought the wrong flavor. That was a big wake up call of like, clearly the flavor differentiation is not working in our current design system. And so that was like one of the biggest early changes we made was our packaging is black. So it's not like we can just change the full color of the packaging, but we increased like color blocks on the top and bottom of each packaging where every flavor had its own unique color. We also simplified our logo. Our logo was like super detailed before, had all these tiny drawings, illustrations in it. Very cool, but when it's printed on a 4x5 bag, nobody sees it. I'd say other big learning for shelf is like tiny details don't work. Mostly just in general, details don't work. Like, simplify, simplify, simplify. Everything should be really clear and simple. So we removed all those details, and then we also turned the logo into this color block where like on every flavor, the logo changes color to match that flavor. We further customized our mascot, Frankie Freak, on each package. So now on every flavor, he's doing like a custom unique action on it. Again, just like lots of little things to make it so that when you're looking at a shelf with multiple Rotten products, even if you don't know like, hey, purple is original and green sour, you at least know like those two are different flavors. And maybe I should look at them a little bit closer to figure out which one I want to buy.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The idea of using syndicated data in general is like really fascinating to me. It's not actually something we've talked to anybody about yet. And I'm wondering if you could give an example of like how you might actually use that data in practice. It could be about packaging or not. And just if you see that, let's say a new upstart is encroaching in the market, how would you go about using that data? Like what metrics are you specifically looking at? And then like what are you doing based on the data that you're seeing?
Yeah. There's so many different ways you can use it. Like one very tactical way is, we are planning 2026 and that involves launching in retailers we don't currently sell it. So, how do we know what velocity to put in that retailer to forecast how many units we're going to sell? We don't. We'd kind of be guessing. Using syndicated data, we can say, hey, this other brand sells in that retailer. This is how many units they're selling. We know in our other retail locations, we sell 120% of what they're selling. We're going to assign that. And it just leads to far more accurate forecasting for us. So that's a big piece. I think the other piece similar to that is you can see promo lifts for other brands. So we can assess, hey, brands similar to ours, when they go on promo in this retailer, they're seeing this amount of lift in their sales. We can forecast that out too. We can also be tracking that ourselves in kind of retrospect and review and ensure that, okay, are the promos we're running, are they working? Are they providing incremental dollars to us in any way? So that's super important to like optimize our trade spend, make sure we're spending well there. I think the other areas to look at are market sizing by price per ounce. So like, let's say today we're at like a 2x premium, price per ounce compared to the incumbent we're going after. We could do an exercise where we look at, okay, how much bigger is the market size for candy in our category at a price per ounce that's 20% less than where we are today? And give us some sense of like, okay, knowing we want to be a brand of this size and the market size at a premium candy of this type is X, like where does our pricing need to go to hit our goals there? There's a lot you can, I think, start to do with the syndicated data.
Yeah, that's really interesting. When you think about pricing and you think about sort of the levers you can pull, I'm wondering like if you have a sense of like how much your margins are impacted by using better for you ingredients in general.
Short answer is very impacted. It's like there's two factors at play, right? Like one is it just inherently our ingredients are that much more expensive than the incumbents, and that will never change. The other factor is CPG just broadly is a category that like works at scale. And so you're competing against companies that are, so much larger than you. And there are a lot of margin improvements that can come with scale. And so you're like operating at a disadvantage on kind of both parts there.
How has your promotion strategy changed since you launched? I feel like it seems like something that'd be hard to figure out how to promote properly. So I'm curious just what's been different as you've learned more in that space.
Yeah. I think we're still early with it. We launched in almost all of our retail this year. And so I think we're still understanding what works and when. I do think, candy has big kind of annual moments, like Halloween being the biggest. And so even though those are also then like the most competitive times, there's still a lot of effectiveness and incrementality to be had during those periods by promoting. One other big piece is I think we've just seen the success, as a lot of other brands do too, of secondary placements, which, work well for a lot of brands and have worked really well for us. We sold a lot of shippers this year, and our shippers like neon green, and you can see an old version behind me actually, but neon green, very eye-catching. That's been a really successful way for us to drive trial and, find new customers.
Just quickly, you mentioned earlier the piece about seasonal moments. Any just high level stats you can share about like how much of sales is Halloween or how much of sales is holidays or something like that? Just I'm always interested to hear like little rules of thumb like that.
Yeah, also any surprising seasonal moments that we might not think about.
Yeah, good question. think the biggest candy moments are probably all ones you're aware of, from Valentine's Day to Easter to Halloween. I think as a better for you brand, we get access to and we perform well in January, which is when most retailers are focused on healthier type items, new year, new you type of stuff. And then one other super interesting dynamic that I really became aware of this year is this concept of summerween, which is people love Halloween and they want to start celebrating it earlier and earlier. And so we actually saw the candy industry broadly saw like summer spikes, summer seasonality, I think starting in July, driven by Halloween. And, there were placements in Costco of like Halloween merchandise starting in July. And so I think that's an exciting dynamic for us because apart from just being a candy that performs well in Halloween, like our branding just inherently matches the holiday. So like even you have all the other brands that come out with the Halloween specific, seasonal items, and the packaging is, black and has like a cobweb on it. It's almost like Rotten doesn't need to do any of that because the packaging already fits the seasonal moment, which I think is good because, as we're talking about seasonal, like that's a big thing for us to consider now is how much effort do we want to put behind thinking about seasonal items or different seasons or whatever that looks like. And I think we really want to stay right now focused on our core assortment.
Are there any rules of thumb around like sales should triple in October, for example? We talked to the founders of La Paz and they had mentioned that for, the industry that they're in, like their Q4 sales should double. And if they don't, they're not on track. So are there any like rules of thumb that you think about around seasonality?
Nothing as crazy as that. There's definitely a spike, but not kind of as big as that.
On the topic of your branding, I noticed you have a fairly kind of a prominent merch section in your website and sell some cool merch. Could you talk about like how you think about that and how you weigh merch, for example, against spending time on the kind of the core candy business?
Yeah,
I'm just curious, like how you think about merch as a topic.
Yeah. The strategy we launched with for merch, has changed a lot. I think when we first launched, I thought merch was going to be more of like a core piece of our revenue strategy. And so what we're doing now is we're reworking what that looks like. And merch is actually going to be a strategy for us to do more partnerships and collabs. When we want to work with another brand or work with an artist or whatever that looks like, doing that with our candy is just a much higher lift, much more effort, oftentimes like super high minimums to do anything custom. So that's challenging. However, when we think about merch as a product in a way we can work with other people, it becomes much more feasible. And so we're doing a lot of work internally right now around building out a kind of new merch strategy that's much more focused on partnerships and collabs.
How do you think about partnerships broadly and I guess collabs broadly as well? Like, are you actively trying to source them? Do you have a list of folks that you'd love to collaborate with? Are you fielding a lot of inbound? Is it a mix of both? And I guess like how much time are you dedicating to figuring out that strategy?
Yeah, it's the mix of both. I think as we've grown now and gotten a better sense of our customer, it's something we're like ready to pursue more. And then I think the other part of it is almost like, how can we maybe not just pursue collabs that make a lot of sense, maybe where there's like a lot of customer overlap, but like, is there also value in doing stuff that's really unexpected and subverts expectations? Because I think like broadly as a brand, as we think about our marketing and creative, like the goal is always to subvert expectations. And so making sure we're, approaching partnerships and collabs in that same way.
Anything that's, as you look over the history of the brand, anything that's been particularly successful from a marketing standpoint, like particular activations or strategies that have just been like cornerstone strategies for you so far?
Yeah. I mean, nothing beats a good founder story. I think launching the brand, I didn't want to be out there doing interviews, being the face of the brand, like making ads. And then, I think it's just people like want to connect with your story of, why this company exists and want to connect with you. And so definitely have found in a lot of our marketing, like that personal founder touch can go a long way.
Do you have a sense of what portion of your consumers are children versus adults?
Not specifically. One thing we do ask, as I mentioned, surveying our online customers, is we ask who they're purchasing for. So, are you buying this for yourself? Are you buying it for kids? Are you buying it for your kids and yourself? There is I can't remember the number off the top of my head right now, but a decent portion of our customers that are both buying it for themselves and their kids. I think a lot of adults just end up eating their kids' candy.
Can you talk to us a bit about the subscription strategy in general? I think that's like a really fascinating part of the business that we haven't really touched on. And I'm curious if you don't mind sharing like what % of revenue comes from the subscription business and how you're thinking about, I guess, either maintaining or building that business out over time, or I guess deprecating it if it's not necessarily like what you want to be focused on.
Yeah, it's something we're always evaluating. It is not like the majority of our online business. Like the majority of online sales, people are doing a one-time purchase versus a subscription style purchase. And I think that's just inherent in like the nature of how people consume candy. Like it's not a supplement or a powder or whatever where there's a benefit to you using it every single day. It's like when you're hungry, when you want to eat it. And so, we have a lot of subscribers who are people who just love the candy and, want the discount and want to be part of this group that gets to test new products and all of that. And so I think we lean into like, great, how can we best serve those customers, knowing that that's not going to be the majority of our customer base.
Do you have a sense of how much of your online customer base is repeat customers, if you don't mind sharing that as well? A topic we've been talking to a lot of founders about is customer retention. And I think it's really interesting to hear generally like what different numbers look like across different companies, across different industries.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Super important. I can't share our number here, but it is definitely something that we track.
I'm curious to hear, when you're talking to retailers particularly, do they bring up GLP-1s a lot when you're talking about the category? Is that something that is on people's mind? And do you think it's relevant like for you at this stage?
Yeah, I was just actually reading a newsletter on some stats there on both already how many households are on GLP-1s and what % of food purchases are being driven by GLP-1 households, and then just the growth in the next 3 years even. And it's pretty crazy. It's definitely something that we touch on when we talk to retailers, and I think we're particularly well suited for that transition. It's for sure a dynamic that we're seeing start to play out. I do think, categories like ours, which are, like little indulgences, that consumers are still, even on GLP-1, still choosing to purchase those.
I heard you mention Liquid Death as a kind of somewhat of an inspiration in another interview, but I'm curious if there are any other companies that you view as like having executed something similar that you look to for inspiration.
Yeah, I'm sure this is also mentioned a lot, but like Love Vacation, I think they have executed world building in like maybe the most successful way that I've seen recently. Like the brand is a vibe and everything they do is true to that vibe. And I look up to that in a lot of ways.
We're big fans of Vacation as well. I think we have time for one more question. Where do you see Rotten 3 to 5 years from now? What's your vision for the future?
Yeah, I get super excited by like mass retail expansion. So I just want the product to be available in wherever you're shopping in 3 to 5 years. Again, our category is so impulsive. I think it's important to be, where the customer's shopping. So I get super excited about being in a lot of places in 3 to 5 years.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really enjoyed the conversation, learned a ton. And if you want to share with listeners where they can find Rotten, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, it was super fun to chat. Thank you both for having me on. And you can find us most easily on Amazon or eatrotten.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can stay up to date on our latest episodes. Thanks for listening.